Hi, I'm Gareth Rose from iPitch.com.au. In this interview, I sit down with Nick Holmes at Court, the founder of BuzzNumbers. BuzzNumbers is a very high potential startup. It was the winner of the 2010 iPitch i10 Awards, and I really wanted to bring Nick in here and hear all about it. In this interview, we discuss how it all started, his previous experience beforehand, bringing on co-founders, raising capital, direct selling, and all his learnings and experience, and how it all comes together to create BuzzNumbers, which is now a very high potential business that's really starting to take off. So here's the interview. Welcome, Nick.
Hello.
So obviously I want to chat with you in depth about BuzzNumbers, but before we do, let's start from the beginning, a little bit beforehand. I know you've been involved in a whole lot of other projects or startups beforehand to get a lot of entrepreneurial experience prior to BuzzNumbers. What were you involved in? Tell me about it.
Cool. So I had a background in software development and, had always been interested in building hobby projects on the side. So, especially being a technical developer, you're able to create new things. So, there was a lot of times where I spent a weekend or a week or some time in between contracts or even, nights and weekends putting some software online and, creating something that people could use that would solve a particular problem in the marketplace. And I got a lot of those things out the door and learned quite a bit in actually trying to get these, out there and getting them in the hands of users.
So what were some of the things you learned previously with these things you did?
Cool. So creating projects that sit online are really interesting. I think what became very evident to me is it's particularly difficult to get money from people, especially consumers on the internet. So, getting someone to put their credit card online is really hard. What I also learned is that you need to get a significant amount of traffic to make any money from, say, like advertising revenue, right? So I think it's really hard to make something that works, online as just some kind of project. If you solve a problem, that's cool, but how big of a problem is it? And, how addressable is that? So you might solve something great, but how much can you actually make out of it? And I think that was a real challenge for me, is that I built some cool things, but not all of them, were going to go massive or, solve enough of a problem or valuable enough of a problem that, people would use it.
So was it the case that, say, prior to BuzzNumbers, you made these projects, or you put these things online to see how they go, and it just didn't really get traction? It just wasn't enough people interested. It didn't solve this big enough problem, and then because of that, you just sort of lost interest, or it just wasn't worth sticking with them. Was that basically it?
Yeah, I think so. And also it's very hard in the technology space because things are moving so fast. So, if you do something that solves a problem today, is it relevant in a year? So I think there's really a need to sort of pick the market a little bit ahead of, the problems that the future will find.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So moving on to BuzzNumbers, what did you do differently this time?
Yeah, cool. So BuzzNumbers for me was trying to solve a problem that I thought large corporations would have. As someone who knew and understood the internet, it was kind of cool and easy for me to be able to, track and understand what people are saying online, do lots of searches. And if you're a very technical and savvy person, you often understand how to use internet technologies. But as a business user, you don't have a lot of time. You've got more money than time often enough. And if you've got a problem that is worth something to your company, then you'll probably pay some money to have that solved if it saves you a bit of time. So I think one of the key things that I really wanted to do with BuzzNumbers was create a B2B company. I wanted to be able to address an existing budget in a corporate spend, so I could go to someone and say, "Hi, do you have this problem?" Yes, we do. Okay, would you pay us some money to take that away from you? Okay, yes, we would. Great. End to end, there was a problem, a solution, and a way to be paid for it. And I think that was really what differed between BuzzNumbers and some of the other things I've done in the past.
And I guess my question is more so though, prior to going in, did you sort of plan that out? Like, were you aware of, hey, this is the problems of my old businesses or my old projects, and you thought, okay, I really need to do something different. I need to do something that's B2B, and you're thinking about that and you're planning it out, and then you're looking for an opportunity like BuzzNumbers. Is that how it came about?
I'd like to say that I was that calculating. Really not. I think I was just building, technology to solve perceived problems. And when I built the technology to, address, the problem that BuzzNumbers solves, it turned out, hey, actually, it has these other benefits from a business model standpoint. So I think my key problem was solve the problem first, and then figure out, yes, this was a great business model, so let's stick with that and continue through. So I don't think it was why I started this, but I think it was the benefit that kept me going and pushed it through from being, the hobby project to being a real business.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, that makes sense. Now, I mean, I'm obviously familiar with BuzzNumbers, and such. But let's hear it from you. Give me the elevator pitch. So, what is BuzzNumbers?
So at BuzzNumbers, we help large corporations and government understand the internet. So people are talking, and there are millions of conversations across blogs, news, forums, all the social media sites like Twitter and Facebook, and all the video sites. So there's so many sites out there and so much content. How do you make any kind of sense out of this? You can't keep up with it all. You don't even know what half the sites are if you're a 45-year-old marketing executive at large corporation X. So what we've done is we've taken all of that online content, brought it into one place, enable people to do stuff with it that they need to. So, generating reports, understanding key influences, or sharing that information within their organization. So ultimately what we've become is a business intelligence tool for the internet.
Okay, great. Very concise. I like that. How did you actually come up with the idea initially?
So I was working at a business intelligence company, helping them load sales and financial data into business intelligence and data warehouses. At one point in time, I always loved the internet. I was really passionate for it, and social media was just kind of emerging in 2006, 2007. And I was just thought to myself, hey, look, when I went to my boss and said, we should load the internet into a data warehouse, into a business intelligence thing, so we can do multi-dimensional analysis and all these kinds of things. And they just went, that's a really dumb idea. Our customers don't care about the internet, they care about sales data and financial data. I was kind of like, look, this is going to be a big thing. So, I kind of built that, sort of put that idea for a side, and evolved over time. And after a period of time, I built a prototype and got something kind of working in that space. So it was really in actually solving a corporation's problems. I don't think I would have had that idea just sitting on the beach. I think it was really about being a part of solving other business problems and taking two different sets of ideas. So I love the internet over here, and I was working in business intelligence. When I was working on these problems, I was like, hey, shouldn't we do this? And that's where it really came from. So I think it's about cross-pollination of ideas is really where you get valuable stuff from. I think it's a bit of a myth that you kind of sit there and go, light bulb, here's some, amazing new thing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I certainly find myself when I'm sort of out there talking to people, and I've obviously got my own ideas, and then they say something and it blends with that, and then I hear about something else, and then it all starts to come together. So that's sort of how I guess evolve ideas myself.
Sure.
Okay, so back to BuzzNumbers. In terms of how it actually started, so I guess day one or the first 6 months or that sort of time frame. Tell me about it. How did it all begin?
So I was lucky because I was a programmer, and I started working sort of nights, weekends, a bit of time, building up something that kind of worked. So I think I initially took a holiday from my job and went and spent 2 weeks just practically without sleep, like an extended boot camp, just going and building some kind of prototype. And I remember coming back from that 2 weeks away and going to some of my friends and saying, hey, look what I've built. I've done this thing, it can kind of work. So, over time I'd worked on that initial prototype, I got something that was working, and then I took it to customers, saying, hey, would you buy this? Would you pay this? And I remember the first time I got a customer, I just picked up the phone, I thought, okay, this kind of software, BuzzNumbers, would solve the problem for PR firms, because they already do media monitoring, so why wouldn't they want to monitor the web? Okay, so, I picked up the phone to all the PR firms, said, hi, I'm Nick from BuzzNumbers, would you like to know what's happening on the internet? And most people said, no thanks, don't care, who cares about the internet, right? And when you consider marketing and communications people in 2006, 2007, a lot of them didn't really care. They just cared about their TV ads or whatever. So, by taking it out to that customer, I did get a bite, and someone went, yeah, okay, we'll buy that. So they bought the product, and it was really early on. It wasn't a very good product, but, they'd never really bought anything out this as well. They'd never bought anything before, so they didn't know if it was good or not. But that was a little bit of validation for me to say, all right, we just made a little bit of money. Let's go and keep developing. So I worked part-time and, whilst I was working somewhere else to get this off the ground. And then in about 6 months in, I went full-time when we were just making a really little bit of money. Okay.
Talk to me about, founding a business by yourself. I mean, there is a big difference between a sole founder and a co-founding team. I mean, you've got to sort of, all startups have these highs and lows, and there's already obviously 1,000 jobs you need to do, and all this stress as well as just workload. Talk to me about sort of, taking on that load as a sole founder.
So I think there's a really big difference, especially if you're a technical founder, from just making something, just creating some piece of software, because many software developers can do that. For me, what made this a business was actually finding a co-founder. So, working on software by myself was good, it was useful, but it was never going to become a big business or something massive beyond myself, because I think it's really hard as one person to keep up with everything. I do know a few successful, sole founders, but even for them, I think it's really hard, and for them, they typically have really good, 2 ICs, or they've made really good first hires. I can't really, I think it'd be really difficult to try and start a company and be successful as an individual. And for me, that was really hard until I managed to find a co-founder to come on board.
Okay, and so tell me about the co-founder. Like, what sort of skills did he bring to the the team?
So because I was having a technical background, a product background, I was really looking for someone who had very, very opposite and complementary skills. So I found an individual who had a very strong direct sales background, who built large sales teams, who was completely non-technical, who knew almost nothing about the internet, like really didn't care for that at all. And that was great, and it was so complementary because, I think there's a lot of people who are looking for co-founders want to find someone like, oh yeah, they're just like me, okay, yeah, they're a great programmer just like me, or they think the same way that I do. And often enough, you want someone who doesn't think the same way that you do. I mean, you have to be compatible and have ways to operate, and I think that's a hard thing in itself. But for me, finding a co-founder who had direct HR experience, team management experience, direct sales experience. And for me, that my co-founder had run a recruitment business prior to this, so it had a lot of sales experience, people experience, team management experience, which was really useful. And for me, it just left me alone in the operations of the company ongoingly to be able to write great software, create great products, and grow a great technical team, and then yet have that aspect of the company managed separately from my day-to-day concern.
Yeah, for sure. That makes a lot of sense. So in terms of the business model, obviously it's software as a service. But it's not self-sign-up. You've got this consultative direct sales model.
Sure.
Tell me more about how it all works.
Yeah, so typically how we acquire customers is we pick up the phone and we call them and say, hi, do you care what people think on the internet? And they'll say, yeah, we do. So, at first they didn't say yes, but I think that was very much about picking the market. So what we found is that we can call them up and say, hi, would you like to take a look at the software? They'd say, sure, we would. It's not particularly difficult to, sell software to people if it's something that they, really haven't done before. We're not competing against an existing, CRM or something. It's not something that there's an incumbent provider for us in most scenarios. So we call them up, we go and demo the software, and we say, would you like to buy, a few months subscription to this software? And they'd say, okay, yeah, we'll buy 3 months. Then, yes, we've got some money from them, which gives us time to work with them. So from that process, they typically would go on and continue their usage of the software with us. I think where we chose not to go from a direct web sales model is we saw that if you give someone a setup wizard online, and if the process is something that they've not done before, often they can kind of hang themselves and not get the outcomes that they want. What we found is by working really closely with the customers, we're able to deliver exactly what they're looking for, and this drives back into our product roadmap. So it's not like us sort of sitting in our high tower saying, here's the software, use this software. It's like, okay, we build something, we take it to them, we work with them and understand, can we make it better? So for us, our customers drive a lot of our product roadmap as well. And really we wouldn't have had that without having the direct sales business model. I think in the future we'll increasingly look to go to web sales as part of this, but I think being close to your customer, especially early on, is of significant value. And for us, having a direct sales process is a great way to achieve that.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts that I had while you're saying that was one of them is because the per sale value of each customer is relatively high. It makes obviously more sense that you can actually afford to go out and do direct sales.
Absolutely.
rather than web sign up. So that was one point. I'm trying to think what the other one was. I'll come back to it. Were you going to make a comment?
That's really about having a B2B sales model, and I think what we've seen especially is that there are some, say, competitors to ours who may not have as compelling features, but broad strokes might say that they do a similar thing, who might be a fair amount cheaper than us and available online. But our customers wouldn't think to research and purchase them. And even if they did, they wouldn't have a good experience. So I think there's value, and for us, what we've learned is, yes, it's great to have great software, but if you can provide some level of service or account management on top of that, which adds multiple of value, yes, they use the service ongoingly, so we're getting our subscription revenue, but by adding that little bit of customer touch or human touch, we create significantly more value for our customers.
In terms of actual setup, are you going in, or either going in personally or over the web, are you training them as well when you set up, or what's the actual setup process?
So the brilliant thing about software as a service is it's pretty much easy to use off the bat, so we don't have essentially a very technical or deep training process. Just because of the nature of what we do, we have our customers set up, for example, they're monitoring keywords. So if they're tracking themselves or their brands or their customers, we might help them get all their keywords ready. And once they're set up, they're typically okay to go from then. So, I think there's some value in understanding, can I create a great software as a service business? Yes. But if I can add a little touch of human service and, automate and process that and have processes for it, can you scale the value of that significantly? So I think that's what we found a really good mix on. But you're right, like if you were selling something that was worth $10 a month, or $20 a month, there's no way you could afford to have a direct sales business. And I think on the other side, if you're trying to sell software like SAP or ERP systems that the customer will pay $1 million for, well, it'll probably take you 2 years to close a deal anyway. So I think for us that sweet spot has been software as a service that's not $10, but not $1 million, and something that they can then buy as part of a process.
Okay, and I mean we've talked about outbound. So you're out there calling these companies saying, do you care about the internet? What about inbound? Like I looked in your website before the interview, and I noticed you got, I think it's just a phone number there in terms of contact. How much traffic are you getting on your website? And I mean, is it that people are out there they've got this problem, they're researching it, and your website comes up? Or, I mean, how does that dynamic work?
So I think what's really important to observe here is, the adoption life cycle, right? So, if you're trying to sell something that people have never done before, you pretty much have to call them because otherwise they won't be looking for it. As we've found ourselves into a marketplace where people want to do this more and more without us calling them, so, with Twitter becoming popular and Facebook becoming popular, companies are saying, dear God, we need to monitor social media. So, they're jumping in Google and they're saying, social media monitoring, or they're getting on a group or a forum or a LinkedIn, page or something saying, hey, does anyone know who we should recommend for this? Then they start coming to our website. So one of our key performance metrics is the number of inbound inquiries and the number of visitors per month to our website. And the way that I've always said is, the function of marketing is to deliver leads to sales. Now, if your sales model is just a web-based credit card sign up, cool. But the purpose of marketing is to deliver leads to sales. And so for us, web marketing and having digital presence is a really important part. And, we do things like actively blog, actively participate in communities, in LinkedIn groups, on Twitter and all sorts of places so that, we build our community online as well as just, it's not just picking up the phone, and marketing really does serve a purpose for us as well.
Are you using AdWords, or is it all like, social or organic? Yeah. What's the breakdown?
We spend a little bit of money on internet advertising when it's very targeted. So we use AdWords, some banner, some sponsorship. One thing that we've found selling the kind of software that we've done is that, for example, like participating in events like keynote speaking or sponsoring, ad tech style conferences, things where we've got a really targeted set of customers who would be there, gives us kind of brand credibility to actually get inbound leads. So what we've found is some of the events that we've sponsored, maybe it costs, $5,000 or $10,000 to sponsor the event, has generated many customers for us. So I think this is probably a point of where being funded can really help you, because if you had no money in the bank, you couldn't spend that $5,000. Even if that $5,000 would generate you $100,000, you still couldn't do it. So
okay, makes sense. Okay, so more about client acquisition. You guys have picked up like a who's who of big name enterprise clients. You've got Microsoft, you've got Red Bull, Weight Watchers, Optus, etc. The list goes on. Explain that more. I mean, you're a startup. You don't have that much credibility, and I mean, you are sponsoring some conferences and things like that to sort of, I guess, get a little bit more. But you're still a startup without a track record. How did you get these big name clients off the bat?
Yeah. So I mean, I guess is the value of having software that solves a problem that maybe other people haven't. So I don't know if it's first mover advantage or what you'd articulate this as, but when you're the first people who tend to solve this problem, or you solve a problem in a unique way which other people don't, then really they don't have much choice but to buy you. So there are much bigger, more established companies than ours, especially US companies who we've got one competitor in the States who's got $30 million of funding, right? But they don't solve the particular problem that these customers want. So what we've found is that some of the bigger companies out there might go out and educate some of our customers and let them know that they have a problem. But then we'll be able to go and actually close the deal because they'll say, oh, so you actually solve this problem in this way. I think also if you're selling software as a service, it's very low exposure to customers. So, we're not installing stuff in their data center. There's low risk for them in adopting this software. And I think that's really what's brilliant about the software as a service model, is they can try it. And I think that, taking software to people saying, would you like to try this? There's no IT setup, there's no servers, we're not coming to your house, we're not, we're not coming to your office, we're not, interacting with your customers. It's been pretty safe. So, I think we've also had a bit of luck in that as well. But also, because of the kinds of customers we've tried to acquire, we wanted to work with these people, and it was really helpful for us in building credibility as a company. So we specifically targeted big brands to want to work with them, so that when they came on board, we'd be able to work with other big brands in the market.
Yeah. Okay. So you're leveraging off that, and obviously now you've got however many, you've got 50 odd or something. It's a whole lot easier to get the next ones.
Absolutely.
This isn't your side of the business as such, because you're more technical. But in terms of the actual sales side, if you know about this, talk me through it. How long is the actual sales cycle? Say you call up Microsoft and somehow I guess what I'm asking is, how do you find the right department, and then how long is the sales cycle? Do you have more details about that?
So, I've got some really specific details and I'll tell you how we got there. That we closed 20% of deals within 4 weeks from first meeting to invoice.
Oh, really? Okay.
So we've got a very specific and very defined sales process. How we got to that, having that specific and defined sales process, is really a good couple of years worth of figuring it out. So how we first started is when we picked up the phone, we'd say, "Hi, PR company, would you like to buy this?" What we found is that people are pretty slow to say no, but they're pretty fast to say yes. So, knowing that, it's faster to win customers than it is to lose them.
Yeah. Okay.
I think what we found is that over time, different company profiles, we'd understand how long they would take. I think also when I talk a little bit about timing in the market, is that 3 years ago or 2 years ago, it took a lot longer to close than it does today, because the market wasn't ready to buy. So when we called up and said, "Hi," I remember going to see one of the big fast food chains. I knew that we kind of solved the corporate comms and marketing. I kind of knew we solved that kind of problem in the business. So we'd call up their corporate comms manager, we'd be able to get a meeting, we'd go in there and say, "Hi, we can solve this." And they'd just say, "Look, we just don't really care, it's not a big enough problem for us now." Skip forward a couple of years and, with people deep frying rats, Hungry Jackson putting the videos on YouTube and these things, all of a sudden they care. So I think for us, we're really lucky with timing, but most definitely the sales process for us has really shrunk. And I think early on, our sales process, at one point was 12 weeks, 8 weeks, 6 weeks, and now some customers we can turn around in less than a week, or even on the day they'll acknowledge the problem and then buy that day.
And obviously it's software as a service, so it is easier for them to implement and make it happen as well.
Yeah,
so.
To provision it's near instant. So,
yeah.
But it took time to understand that, and getting the business model right, and structuring it in the right way. Initially we did stuff is we'd only sell 12-month contracts. We wouldn't sell anything less. But we found out, maybe that's too long, because people don't know if they want to do this for 12 months. But 1 month is no good, because it's not long enough to really see whether they're going to get as much value as they'd like to, because who knows what happens in just 1 month, or people are busy over a month. So what we found is that for us the 3-month period was the right mix, but it took us a long time of trying to sell 12 months and then realizing 1 month isn't enough revenue to make it worthwhile. So those kinds of things. So that became important. I think also understanding when not to take up business became really important for us, because what we found is that there were certain we spent a fair amount of time doing customer profiling, but there are certain profiles of customers who were bad customers for us. They were very time intensive, they didn't pay much money, they wanted a million things that we didn't necessarily do. And what we profiled other customers who were very easy to please, who got a lot of value very quickly, and we said, let's go and work with those kinds of people, not with the difficult people. And I think by doing that, we enabled our sales process to be much more efficient, because I think especially as a startup with limited resources, you can't chase everything, there's too much stuff out there. So, we said, we want these kinds of customers with this kind of profile, with these kinds of problems, and let's go and solve their problems. And people outside that, even if they're saying we've got money, it's bad money, it's not healthy, it's unhealthy.
So, that's a very interesting point. So in terms of profiling that, how clear is it, or was it? Is it by industry, you can say this industry, they're bad, or is it a type of manager, or the type of hierarchy in an organisation, or what would be an example of some, bad money examples.
So I think if any other startups were looking to do this, or I was doing this again, I think if you try and do any customer profiling, you'll be wrong at least the first few times.
Yeah.
And it's just going through the process that gets you to right. So for us, you could profile customers by saying what sector. Is it HR, customer service, corporate comms, marketing, sales, whatever, right?
Yeah.
So that's one way of slicing it. Another way is to slice it by industry. So IT or pharmaceuticals or financial services or consumer goods or whatever it was. And what you might find if you cross those two things, you might find a sweet spot. So corporate comms at pharmaceutical companies have this kind of problem. Especially if you make a sale. For us early on, when we made a sale, we said, what about them made them purchase? Well, they were in this type of part of the business and they were in this industry. Let's go after all the people in that industry. And do we find that? So if you go, yes, there was a problem solved there. Let's go get all the people in, corporate comms at pharmaceuticals, for example, right?
Yeah.
That's our sweet spot. Just go get that stuff. And sometimes we were wrong about that. It was actually this person just bought for some unknown reason. They weren't representative of their customer base.
Over time, you got patterns and you can follow them. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. One other point you mentioned before, which I actually found quite interesting because I'm from a sales background, was about customers when they say yes quickly. I mean, they're the ones you want to chase, and I can't remember the exact words used, but it was something about saying they're quick to say yes, but slow to say no.
It takes longer to lose a sale than it takes to win one. People, and there's some really interesting research about this, like the number of days between no thanks, we won't go with you, and the number of average days between yes, we'll go with you. It's definitely much longer. At least a third to maybe double as longer.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. I mean, and particularly why I highlighted that is you said it very well. My experience in sales is it's definitely the case that when you're calling up people, I mean, you either get these ones which say yes or quickly, they're really interested, and they're the ones that do close and they close quickly. Everything else, either, basically if they say no or if they say, they've got to talk to someone or whatever it is, you can almost put all of them in the same category, which is no, it's not going to happen. So,
but I think it's really important not to discount those customers, and I think this is where lead nurturing programs really come into place because what we found anyway as customers go through their buyer's journey, right? So, for example, if they're completely unaware that they have a problem, then you've got to invest in the education, right? And they may not buy because the timing's not right, and that's applied to us a lot. For example, as customers go through this journey, so they might be unaware that they've got a problem. They might be acknowledging they've got a problem but trying to understand the business case. They might understand the business case but they're doing vendor selection. They might be doing vendor selection, they're just doing due diligence. So there's on the other end of the scale, there's nothing worse than showing up, for example, when a customer's already looking to purchase and they're just doing due diligence on your service against a competitor that they've already made a decision on. And government departments tend to do this a little bit from what I've seen in past experiences. It doesn't apply to us so much now, but what I think is really important about this is that just because a customer's not now doesn't mean not ever. And I think what we found is by having a really good CRM process and by having really good lead nurturing programs, it means that you can continually deliver value to people who mightn't be ready now but be ready later. And for us, a huge amount of business today is people who initially said no when we first called on them and said, hey, would you consider this? I think the important part is just keep going. Don't dismiss these people. Keep the relationships. And, I'm not in sales today, but I watch our sales guys, and they'll call someone, say, "Hey, you thinking about this?" And they'd say, "Not now." And you go, "Okay, look, I'm going to call you back in 3 months." And I've seen some customers that we've called back, in 3 months, 5 or 6 times in a row now, and they've gone, "Oh, I'm pleased you called back. We were talking about you the other day. We'd like to buy you now." And it's like, if we dismiss them and if we just didn't talk to them, then we might have lost that future value. I think that's part of the startup process is you do gain this kind of value. Not all of it converts today, but each month that you keep going or each period of time you get momentum, right? And sometimes people that you saw a while ago now come back to you. So I think that's really important. There's EDM programs and blog articles that you should send to your customers and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think it's really important over time to build that customer base.
Yeah, thanks for going into detail about that. I mean, in terms of the ability of a CRM to track these things and keep that, okay, I'm going to contact this person in 3 months or 6 months or whatever it is and keep that conversation going, it's awesome. But the particular point you raised there about, around educating or nursing them through their stage or process, that was very interesting. So thanks for sharing that. Look, at the start of 2010, I believe there's only a couple of you, and it was just starting to come together. When did you actually start to get traction?
Okay. So we started effectively incorporated the company at the beginning of 2009, and we did a year of kind of software development, building the project stuff. In 2010, we really got serious. We put a little bit of angel money into the company. We hired grew a couple of headcount in the sales team. We were really serious. So what we kind of figured out is, this wasn't just a piece of software. This is a business, and building a piece of software or building a software as a service product is one thing. Scaling a business is another set of problems. So how do you create scalable processes to hire salespeople? How do you create scalable processes to manage customer retention, customer billing, credit control, all these kinds of things that a business needs to care about. I think are really important. So for us, we spent 2010 putting in place all of the processes to manage our sales, our accounts. So whilst we had an infinitely scalable software as a service product, did we have an infinitely scalable business to back it up? And so we spent 2010 scaling up that business, getting the process in place, and getting customers as part of that. So we went foot to the floor on a sales process, did a little bit of marketing. We still have never really spent much money on marketing. I don't always think it works for startup companies. You think just buying ads is going to get you there. I don't think it always does. So for us, we spent the year growing this, and we grew from a couple of grand a month to a significant volume more. So we grew a big headcount out of that and a big customer base, and it's a great personal journey to have gone through this year to see the growth of that company from just a piece of software, a great piece of software, but to a business, and that's a really different thing.
Yeah, for sure. Now, in terms of that actual growth there and headcount, you've now got something like 15 employees and probably increasing from where you're at now.
Sure.
There is a big difference between running a startup with just the founders and you're just worried about just your roles and building the business and those sort of concerns, to suddenly bringing on and recruiting staff and bringing them on and then managing staff. What was that like for you?
So bringing in new people in the business is a really interesting thing to do. It's a fantastically liberating thing to be able to have greater headcount, people who can take over concern in the business that you may have been spread very thin over. In terms of finding the right people, leveraging the community was fantastic. Working with people who we worked with in the past. I think we put in place some hiring processes and something that we called, sounds a bit dorky and corporate, but we put in place this thing called A players, right? And that was kind of like an agenda for the company, is that you only want to work with A players, right? So we think about a sports team, right? A players are people who, they run faster than last time, they hit further than last time. The kind of people who make you want to be better because they perform well. So we said, let's just hire people who we thought fit this category. Hire quickly, be decisive, but fire quickly as well. I think the important part about team mentality is that when you create an A, if you want to put in place an A player mentality or something, then people who kind of don't deliver ultimately weed themselves out. You kind of don't need, if you say, how many meetings are you going to book today? What are you going to ship today? What are you going to do today or this week, right? And if someone in the team is consistently not meeting what they say they do, they know themselves. You don't need to manage them. So for us, we don't really have a disciplinary culture or anything like that. It's just about, hey, what are you going to do? Did you get there? And if people consistently don't get there, they kind of say, well, hey, maybe I'm not doing the thing that I'm best suited to do, and they can evolve into whatever that happens to be.
Yeah, so it was more about setting that A player culture as such within the business, and then to a certain degree it runs itself from that on. That's
the dream, isn't it?
Yeah. Alex Sparks mentioned that in the Country Cars interview, that what David did something pretty similar to that, sort of setting the culture right from the start, and that was a big influence ongoing. So in terms of actually hiring these guys, I think you said you leverage the community, so we're talking about the startup community, but what, or something else, were you,
yes and no.
What did you mean by that?
Personal communities, communities are people that we've worked with in the past. So I'd worked from a technical background and learned from people that I'd enjoyed working with, and our CEO and co-founder had grown big direct sales teams in the past, and knew some key people that he'd worked with. So in starting this company, we looked back and said, who have we worked with in the past that were kick-ass?
Yeah.
How do we get them in the business. And also, we have acquired some people like through Seek job ads, or some of our key employees did come through Seek. I think the thing is, if you're in a growth company, you're always hiring. Like, even if you're not hiring, you're hiring. Like, be hiring. Like, always be getting CVs to your desk. Like, even now, like, even if I don't have a job that I need filled, I'm always checking CVs, posting job ads out, because the best people, mightn't be available for a few months. So, if you can connect with a guy who's going to be a kick-ass guy in your business, but he's not available for 3 months, well, find out now, and you can get him later on. So I think working to other people's schedules turns out to be pretty important. What we've also found is the guys that we've brought into the business who've been really good, we always say to them, who have you worked with in the past that you think was really good, that you really liked working with? Do you want to see if they'd want to come join us? And when you create that environment where you get people in who you think are kick-ass, and then you ask them, hey, who did you think was kick-ass? And then you've got access to big networks. So almost everyone who's joined the company has brought on someone that they've worked with in the past who they thought was good, and we think that's a great way to build a great team.
I'd also assume there's a great team dynamic, because if you've got basically mates in there that you've known in the past, or who you respect and all that, then that would be really good within the business. So that's cool. Okay, so you mentioned funding before, and angel funding early on in the business. Talk me through that. Sort of, at what stage did you get angel funding, and how did you find that process?
So I think, at least from my view of entrepreneurship in the world, is like, I really wanted to be funded. Like, from day one, it was like, let's get funded, because then we'd be able to do way more, So for me, I'd always kind of wanted to raise money for the company. I think, we really, you're not ready to raise money early enough just because you got a piece of technology or an idea or a little bit of a product. I think you can raise money in America, if, in Silicon Valley, if you've got, a couple of good guys and a good deck and a bit of a prototype, you can raise money. I think the reality in Australia is that that's almost next to impossible unless you've done it before, or you know the right people, or things that most people aren't, and I definitely wasn't at that point in time. So it took a long time to raise money. I think it took about 9 months, maybe a year, from actually getting serious about it. And even when I thought I was serious about it, I look back at it now and go, I wasn't serious about it. So spending the time to get together, your one-page plan, your 10-slide deck, your investor, your IM documents, and then even being ready to do term sheets on the back end, and subscription and share sale and purchase agreements and subscription agreements. Like, I just had no idea of the complexity of that. I kind of just thought, I'd go, I've got this idea, and someone would go, all right, here's 100 grand for 10% of your company, like, let's go. I think it took a really long time. I think in raising the capital, I think that's really important for first-time entrepreneurs, is to be really aware of, to be cognizant of disappointment. Like, you will get people who will say, oh, I'm interested in your company, and you're like, we're going to get funded. But like, you know what? Most people don't from that point in time. Like, from actually being an angel, a friend of a friend, or an industry person, the chance that any one investor that you meet will fund your company is relatively low. So ultimately, it's a numbers game, right? Like, you need to go and see, 20 people or 50 people or 100 people, or, all these kinds of things. And what I think is really important is, if you decide to raise money, to do it in parallel. Don't go, I'm going to go see this investor, and if he says no, I'll go to the next one, because...
over a long period of time.
Yeah, because...
you just got to get out there and do it.
Do it to everyone, because raising money takes so much of your time, And I remember I was speaking with some investors who'd say, and this is probably another tip, like, if an investor says, I'll fund you if you do this, for me, that's a really big red flag. It means they're not that likely to fund you, because like, they'll say, oh, we'll fund you if you do this. So then you run and do the thing that they want you to do, and they go, yeah, but we really want to see this. Like, why are you following that person's instruction? They haven't given you money. You should go be listening to a customer and doing what they want, because at least they'll give you money, right? So I think for many companies, it's important to focus on the customer, not the investors, in terms of getting your product roadmap and what you should be doing. But it's kind of hard in terms of the investment process. And we spoke with venture capitalists, private individuals, friends and family, all these kinds of things, and went through a bit of a process.
So at the point you actually raised, though, what stage was the business at? Like, what did you actually have? The name of the business.
So at that point we had a website. We would have done maybe $10,000 or $20,000 in revenue. We had a product, we had some customers. I think
recurring customers.
Recurring revenue was like $4,000 or something at that point.
Okay.
$2,000. It wasn't very much at all, and it was really one or two key customers who were using the software.
But something, I guess, key to me that I'm hearing there is that you you did have something legit. You had a product out there. You did have customers who repeat, who are liking it. There's a real business there. It is a big difference between, and this is what I hear a lot at iPitch, there's guys who have just got an idea and they're yet to launch, or it's more pre-startup than that. It's really pre-seed, and they're like, I need this money, and it's just not going to happen in Australia.
Look, I think it's really different if you're doing a B2C startup, and that's probably where a lot of the things that I think don't apply. Like, this isn't about B2C. It's not like if this catches on, 1 million people will use it. Our software doesn't work like that. Our business isn't like that. So for yes, we're software as a service, and yes, we're Web 2.0 and all this stuff. But that's what's probably different about our phase. I think with just an idea, it's still hard to get funded. But maybe on the B2C side, people will punt a little bit more. And especially, we're seeing these new startup incubation programs and things like StartMate and a couple of these other things are showing up, which are changing that nature. But if you're 3 years ago, there was zero, seed fund capacity, right? There's no one who's going to chip you 25 grand to see whether you can build something, So I think you kind of had to do that. And for us, that was kind of a blessing. And it meant that we, got a high valuation and, we're more stable as a company because we had to make something that was, made money and did work, at least in some capacity. Otherwise, we wouldn't have ever got the funding. So that's, that was really important for us.
Yeah, okay, great. What are some of the mistakes you made along the way?
So, because I'd done a few projects and had, businesses and things before this, I think there was a lot of mistakes along the way. I think a key mistake that I've made is if you don't have a defined way to get money from your customer's wallet into your pocket, it's not a business. Like, that's what a business does, right? They have a way to say, I'll give you something, customer, and you will give me money, and it will be in my, I know how to do that, right?
Yeah.
And I think in last businesses, I really hadn't figured that. I think also some of the mistakes on last business is I hadn't really thought about scaling. Scaling a business, it's pretty easy to start a business. Anyone can have an idea and register a company and all that stuff, right? Starting a business is easy. Scaling a business is hard, like to go from 1 customer to 500 customers or even 1 to 10 customers is, it's a really hard thing because it's not just about doing what you do, it's now actually making it work all the time. So I think that was probably some learnings that I'd had in the past and mistakes that I'd made in the past is just, underestimating how difficult scaling a business is compared to starting one.
What about specifically with BuzzNumbers? What, did you make any mistake? I mean, has it been a sweet ride the whole way, or did you make any mistakes early on, or even now?
Look, I think there's a whole lot of mistakes that people make. I think the important part is, and this is baked into our corporate culture, is it's okay to fail as long as you acknowledge it and learn and don't do it again. Like if you're like, oh gee, I deployed this thing on the server and it crashed the server and it blew everything up, right? Like it was down for a day or something, right? You go, oh, that sucks, big failure there. What did we learn from it? How do we not do that again? And how do we share that knowledge amongst the team so that, it makes us a better company? So I think, for us, having mistakes along the way have been ways to improve. And I think, really early on, especially when you're a really early piece of software, is, we kind of probably oversold the customers a little bit. We said, hey, we can do all these things because, we were young, we're enthusiastic, you want to do all these cool things. So you say, hey, we can do all this stuff. And the customers might be a bit disappointed because they might have, especially really early on, they're, oh, well, it doesn't do it as well as you say, or this or that. And I think we kind of learn about the balance of over-promising, and you don't want to under-promise because then no one will buy you, right? Oh, we don't do anything. That's not a sales pitch. It's like, we do this stuff, and it's like, and we do it well. I think also acknowledging what you don't do is probably a real thing because I think especially the entrepreneurial mindset, you kind of want to say yes to everything. So learning how to say no becomes really important. Like can you do this? Sorry, we can't. Okay, sometimes customers will go, oh, that's fine, I think a lot of entrepreneurs and early businesses feel like if they say no, that people will tell them, don't want to work with you. And that applies to employees or investors or whatever. So some mistakes I made was probably saying yes early on when I really should have said no and said, that was not the right thing to do. So
okay, good. And what about some things that have really worked well with BuzzNumbers? Maybe some marketing or some sales stuff that we haven't discussed so far that, maybe it's just a small thing you did or some sort of campaign or whatever it is that really works really well for BuzzNumbers. Has there been any examples of something like that?
So I don't think so. I just think we've been relentlessly focused on how do we make stuff and how do we do stuff, not so much how do we talk about it. And I think, one of our mottos is, less talk, more action, right? Like, plenty of people want to talk about stuff, and this is like, no, success comes from hard work, like lots and lots of hard work, and I don't think there's any one sort of bright spark moment or anything that we did that was amazing. I mean, there's plenty of good tips along the way. I think probably just what I did well was find a great complementary co-founder. That was the one thing that really kicks ass. So we had just such different skills to me. That was the thing. If you're a technical founder, you probably will struggle to make a great company yourself. If you can find someone with very complementary skill sets who can pull the cart along. And I think for the way I always see it for co-founders and explain is that it's like a bunch of oxen pulling a cart along. Sometimes you might be tired as an oxen. You bull exploit the thing on, you get tired, but the other guys will keep going, and so the cart keeps moving. But if you're by yourself, you get tired, the cart stops, right? So what I found is that having that kind of environment where you're both pulling along together means that you go double as fast, but you're also there and can manage the downsides as well.
Yeah, okay. And just to clarify that, in terms of the co-founder, you were initially, I guess, founding or running it yourself, and then you brought in another person early enough that was still calling a co-founder.
Yeah, so I was really lucky that basically the angel that I found was a high net worth individual who'd been successful in a business before but was looking for something else to do, really wanted to roll her sleeves up and get their hands dirty. And so we structured some kind of thing where I said, hey, put in a bit of money, but come work for the company for a year as well. And to be fair, I wouldn't have taken that money without that time, and that's really where the value was. So, the money could have not existed. It wouldn't have made a difference. It was the time of that individual. So that's how I kind of structured. But, the language that I tend to use is, we brought in a CEO, and for me, it meant standing down as, top dog and saying, I'm not, not everyone, I don't run the show 100% of the time. And that's a good challenge as a founder as well, switching from being, bringing in a team and having more senior people in the business to say, I'm not necessarily, the best guy to be solving all the problems of the company. You're great at doing what you do, but you don't necessarily solve every problem the best. So let's have other people do that who are really good at solving that problem. And I think that's what makes a great company at the end of the day.
Okay. And a thought I'm having here is that you've had a fair amount of previous projects and startups and attempted startups and now obviously BuzzNumbers it's taking off, but there's so much work. I mean, as an entrepreneur or as a startup founder, you've got so many hours in the business, you've got to work on the business, you've got meetings, you've got networking, you've got potentially learning new skills, you've got reading these other books, you've got everything. It's a very complex, busy lifestyle. And then suppose you can have, or perhaps a real lifestyle on the side as well. How do you manage it all? Do you have sort of maybe routines on a weekly basis of where you it could be you only meet people on certain days, or you only check emails at this sort of times, or something like that. How do you keep it all together?
So, I think, at least for me personally, being an entrepreneur is ahead of almost everything in my life, other than becoming a parent, which is what I became during this the last couple of years. It's overridden my social life, it's overridden family life, it overrides everything, right? I don't really have hobbies, I don't really go watch the football with mates or anything like that. It's just, it's about running the company. And if that's your core focus, well, how do you do that exceptionally well? And, what's proven and what worked in the past? So, we've got some really good planning processes that we use to keep the company ticking along. Basically, we set some key values for the company. Key values are things like, A players, wanting to deliver value, acknowledging, mistakes and improving, and delivering, great success, right? So you take these key values and we set up, milestones and all those kinds of corporate things. But I guess on a more micro level is basically at a 3-month level, we meet every 3 months at the beginning and say, what are we going to get done this 3 months that heads towards our thing? We create a theme around that and then we go and execute on it. Now, for that 3 months, what we do every day is a daily stand-up where you say, what are you going to do today? What are you going to get done tomorrow? And what are any obstacles? So every morning, the whole company, both sales and tech, we get up and we say, at 9:09 every morning. The reason we like 9:09 is because people don't come in for 9 o'clock, they slip in a bit late or, this or that. But because it's 9:09, it's kind of a silly time, right? But you remember it. So we have our daily 9:09. So, and everyone stands up. You've got, 30 seconds to say, what are you going to do today? What do you do tomorrow? What did you achieve? And again, it's a great way to share what's happening across the company. So for us, that's the pulse of our company every day. Boom, boom, boom. And if you see patterns of things not being done, the whole company can see it. So you're like, we're consistently having this problem. Let's put more time, more resources, and effort to take out those obstacles or those bottlenecks. And I think some of that comes from Scrum style software development, but some of it comes from management techniques from things like the Rockefeller habits put forward by Vern Harnish, and there's some other great corporate management techniques. So I think we've got a nice blend of that. But for us, our quarterly planning and our 909s is just the rhythm of the business. Plus, for the management team, we meet once a week and say, how are we doing on sales, how are we doing on expenditure, how much cash have we got, how much cash have we spent, what are receivables, what's payables, and what are our key objectives. So, the management get to share their issues and challenges in the company as well.
Thanks, that was very interesting. You personally, being the entrepreneur that's leading all this though, do you have any, other than what you just said there, which was great, but do you have any specific, routines or ways you structure your day or your week that's separate to that, or it's basically everyone
just work really, really hard all the time.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know. For me, there's nothing personally that drives the rhythm for me.
Yeah, that's cool. So, look, to finish off with, because we're running out of time here, what's the next thing for BuzzNumbers?
Cool. So, we're seeing great growth this year. We'd like to continue to see great growth. We want to be the number one player in Australia in our space, which, I think we're leading the market on today. We'd like to be abroad as well. So we're just opening up in Los Angeles next month. We'd like to open up in the UK as well. We're currently 15 headcount. We'd like to be 30 headcount in Australia later this year. So I think, we've got definitely some goals to achieve what we want. Everything that we do for the future and everything for our company is driven by this one idea that we have, which is 2015 by 2015. So by the year 2015, we want to have 2015 enterprise customers, and everything we do trickles down from that. So that affects all of our decision making. Who should we partner with? Where should we open? How do we structure our products? And everything falls under that. So, I think, we're here for the long haul. We're making a great company. We've got great revenue growth. We've got great products. We're addressing a market that's exploding. And we just look forward to succeeding and achieving more and more of that. And that gives me personal satisfaction as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm looking forward to following and seeing how you all go. So, yeah, great. And thanks a lot for the interview.
Okay. Thank you very much, guys.
Cheers. That was the interview. Hope you enjoyed it. If you've got any feedback or recommendations of people who I should be interviewing, please let me know. I do want to hear about it. Get in contact with me via the iPitch website. That's the best way. And otherwise, look out for more interviews at ipitch.com.au. Thank you.